The great territorial families in this country have been wealthy for centuries and remain in established wealth, and the same is in the main true of the great Italian families. It is obviously true of the great German families, and in spite of the great changes of the last century and a half, it is still largely true of the old French families. It is not true of the Jewish families. And that is from Hilaire Belloc, his book, The Jews. And welcome to episode 95, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for tuning in. We're going to be talking today about Michael's article entitled Jews and Templars. And we're going to be getting into the etymology of those terms, the whole history that has not really been spoken about. And I think there's going to be a lot of information that I know myself and many of you listening will have never heard of before. So, Michael, welcome, and maybe give a quick introduction to your article, and then we can start dissecting the meaning of that quote.
Well, the quote's great. I recommend that book. It's one of the most, like all my work, it goes to the most eminent of academics, given that most academics are utter insidious creatures, they're apologists for the system, but there is within it, you see, just enough of the most illustrious types. And when you go to their works, superlative works, you're on the strongest ground there is, in subjects of all kinds, and particularly this subject as well. So I really recommend that book, because just like that one quote shows, there is a question. At the very least, there's a question. It's nothing to do with exonerating the Jews, but it is facing certain facts about them. And we'll come back to this one at the end, because it deals specifically with the finances. If you can have world control, and if that control is going to be universal, obviously you have to have the kitty to do that. You have to have the funding at your fingertips. Well, is that possible? Is it maybe it's possible for a single family to grow rich and to mess about, but how can then a vast group of Jews who are basically guests in other people's country, can they have their access to this cash at will? Is that even possible? See, the questions like that one has to think about. But that question that quote just kicks us off in the right direction. Summarizing that point, but the bigger point that I make in the article is whether or not Jews are the prime movers in the world conspiracy, as many people do. And many of those people, I appreciate their work. It's been very enlightening to me. But one has to also continue to ask questions and to mature. And of course, the whole question of the Jewish role in any kind of event in history, any country's event, is vast, right? Their role in England would take, program after program to go into, let alone the world. But I've done a lot in the 3 articles that are on the Female Illuminati website for people to dive into that, But again, all I'm asking at this point, is the question I ask myself. Hypothetically, what happens if they aren't the prime movers in the world conspiracy, as certain writers, anti-Semitic writers, tend to be anti-Semitic anyway, are semi-anti-Semitic and all, that they propose, right? But what I'm asking the hypothetical question, what if that idea isn't true? What do you do with it? Where do you go next? Say you convince yourself, right? Or just even hypothetically say, no, I don't believe that anymore. What do you do? Where do you go, right? And then if you ask a question, hey, maybe I go further and say it's even designed to lead us away from the truth. Wow. Can anybody even ask themselves that question? People who've grown up on the writers that I mentioned who tend to be more anti-Semitic and say, yeah, it's just there. You see, the thing with me also is I've lived with people, I've worked with people who in 30 years haven't budged from that. They find that out in their early days, David, as you well know, and then that's it, man. They become cemented. They become literally quagmired and 20 years later, they haven't evolved mentally.
Right.
And they're not asking deeper questions. But I'm asking the question, maybe it's not true. And maybe it's not only not true, it could have, we got some powerful power brokers up there who are quite able to create red herrings. I deal with that in my work in Irish origins. If they've created it as a smokescreen to lead you away from the truth, then you must ask how you would go about proving that. Is it even possible to prove it? And what force benefits from such a deception? This opens the door. It takes you into a lot of questions, right? And I would say that the person who doesn't ask questions like this, they have no role, no place in the so-called research community. None at all. Might as well just go back to the world. Because in this movement, that's exactly what you're meant to do. And I do it. I ask I question things like this, and I do ask. And I do then find out, gradually, I go for the long haul and I find out what's going on. Because I also know that when you're dealing with conspiratorial matters, unlike any academic matter, as soon as you're in the occult world of the conspiracy, it's labyrinthine, especially when you're dealing with secret societies. You've got more problems studying this stuff than you would, say, a normal, a normal subject. Because you can't afford in this movement to accept the obvious. Jesus, the whole architecture has been laid by some very, very cunning people to strangle you in the webs as you try to get free. You can't say that about normal work or normal tuition. So I know that there's a labor, right, of propaganda. I actually even know who the propagandists are. Somebody who would benefit from having a red herring, say the Jews in this case, right, and letting you follow that. There's an incredible story there, which we can't even go into here, but I'm just asking those questions. But I would say that, look, just even if you move up to where we are now in the 21st century, it's an important question, because look at the headlines. It's actually a necessary and overdue question, this question about the Jews. Because look at who's the real threat now. And if you come away like I did from reading somebody like Chuck Morse, who's a fantastic author, he's been on our show several times. He's coming on again next week. His latest book, Left Wing Jews, that helped me clear away a lot of debris and to get things straight, to get things into perspective. And that's why, while I was reading that work, it came to me to move forward and write the article, Jews and Templars, right? Because as a Jewish man himself, and he knows Hebrew and all, and he knows Jewish history through and through. So there's a lot of enlightening things there from that alone. And his work has helped me certainly get things into perspective, not again to exonerate complicit Jews, right, whose names are well known, but to have a much broader understanding of what's really going on. But as I come back to the point, if you look at the headlines today, we've got Islamo-communism. We've got Islam, the rise of radical Islam to deal with. We have got China, the threat of China. And behind China only goes where Russia points and directs. So, and this Russia is completely untrustworthy. I don't care what kind of face they try to put on. They're still behind, the fall of the West. We've got this red papacy, and that's just to name a few. So when you see all the threats that are now quite obviously there at the door, a secondary sort of a response to that is to re-question what we know about the past. And, if some of it is erroneous, to throw it out, and if not, then you preserve what you've learned. But always, 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 you need to turn back and look down the path and see where you've come from, and maybe find out, the error that was in your way. You remove those blocks for other people. That's what Jews and Templars was about. It's an incredible story, but just in the most basic way, it was to remove some impediments for people who may be coming into the subject, for new. And we don't want them to be making all the mistakes and getting all, obsessed by things that turn out not to be true. That's no good.
Well, and that's important for everybody to understand too, is that this isn't as simple as saying, "Oh, it's this one group over here doing all this stuff to us, and it's only the Jews. It's only this, the elite." It's this feeling in people that there's a finger pointing that needs to happen when they can't solve the question. And I think that's natural, because we're all trying to find out, where are these roots of tyranny? Why does this keep happening? Why do we keep repeating these cycles? And one thing that I like about what you do in the article is you're not trying to go after one group just because they're that group. You're actually defending, average Jews who are just, probably good people wanting to pursue their own religious ideology. But then to get even into the word Jew, as this is something that is completely misunderstood in modern day. Like it's actually, the Jew is a rank in a lot of these secret societies. And when you get into Masonry and when you get into Templarism, it's a rank. It has nothing to do with a race. It has nothing to do with people wandering through the wilderness or any of that. And we can always get into the history of the Jews, which has been, if you get into Ralph Ellis's work and we go back to ancient Egypt and we tell that story. But maybe talk a little bit about the definition of the word Jew and the idea of Judites. And this is something that I think is really important to clear up for people.
Absolutely. Before I do that, can we go to the second slide? There's something I've always mentioned that symbolism and etymology has already told us the story. They're so important, right? Because in the movies or in literature, in fiction, we suspend disbelief. And so the controllers, and also other people, not just the controllers, but other well-meaning people, have used this to communicate certain truths straight through to the right right brain, straight through to the imagination, where the critical centers, they're still operative, but they're not as strong. And also we are then saying to those people, hey, we'll be more receptive. So never ever forget in this journey, so I've brought this up time and time again, and I've seen that a lot of people have responded to it since I start first bringing it up, in the days before even YouTube. It did inspire people to start looking at advertisements and commercials and realize that these symbolically are like keyholes into the truth. But the Star Wars, saga there, when you have Yoda representing, as we'll see, a very key Jewish motif. And right beside it are the Jedi Knights. Well, I mean, come on, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that what is Judaic iconography and Knights Templar iconography, we've accepted. Do you know how many millions of people have watched that and will continue to watch it all over the world without a single clue what we're going to talk about in the next hour? And never will ever associate the Templar symbolism and Judaic symbolism, side by side. Unable to completely judge the truth, but they've accepted it emotionally. They've accepted it in their imagination body. This fusion, this conflation. And again, I asked the question: who would do that? We'll see that Yoda, that word is the key because it's a diminution of Jehovah, unquestionably so. But you see, another thing that ties into this, much more controversial, of course. But as I say, I'm sorry, smack me on the knuckles for doing this, but since 1980, because I've been studying this since the late 70s, right? So I've asked a question. The people that we're going to talk about, later as the prime movers in the conspiracy, I mean, are they going to allow all of these Grail bloodline type books to come out, whether they're Mother Mary or the Knights Templar or the Order of Sion or whatever? Since the early 80s, they came in and there was a floodgate, leading, it's an explosion of cottage industry, right? But who are these men? Who is a Hancock? Who is a Beauval? Who is a Henry Lincoln and a Lay and a Bay Gent and hundreds of others I could mention? Are they what they appear to be, which is well-meaning mavericks who just happen to stumble over this mystery? Okay, you want to believe that? Go ahead. Hey, something is probably true. But when you are on the scent of the predator, you can't afford to accept that that's the case only. And then you look at the publishers, huge, mega, super mega publishers are behind these people. So again, one, it's just, is it just me? And it's fine if it is, but I think that, as you said, let's look at that. What did you say? The Jew, the very term, it's again, etymology. It does open the door to reveal a lot of esoteric dimensions. And that's where we want to go, because those are the parts I said are never accepted or taught by these academics, the sinister breed who have control over what we know about the past. They're basically the mythmongers. But if you go to, I think it's slide 3, in the article, I do start with that the word Jew can appear to come from Judite. It's the same, meaning a man who is a Jew. And that is there on the most topical level, right? The most official level is geographical. It's from Judah, right? Judean, meaning you're from a territory of Judea, which is south of, the territories of Israel, right? Israel is where they've meant to settle, if you take the biblical idea. And then on the southern territories is Judea. And so a Judean is a Jew, or a Jew is a Judean. I mean, that's just a topographical, geographical explanation. But then if you go to the next step, they say, but the territory was named after Judah, who's the fourth son of Jacob. Abraham, Jacob, and Jacob was renamed Israel. Very important that. Not that he's called Israel, but that there's a name change going on. Because part of my work rests very strongly on the fact that there is this transmogrification, right? So one of the earlier patriarchs, it's not just the spelling of his name has changed, his whole name has changed. We need to bear that in mind because it's absolutely crucial. It's part of the etymology that lets you into a lot of other areas. Or somebody like Sarah, right, the wife of Abraham, her name in Aramaic means, like princess, things like that. So, when you see a 700-page book, Irish Origins Volume 2, now you know why. It's because there's an exploration going on that is not taught